I first met Josh during our second year at university. He was one of those rare people who could make anyone feel 80s within minutes, quick with a smile, sharp with his humor, and endlessly generous with his time. We quickly became study partners, and before long, I was spending late evenings at his family home, working on projects or simply escaping the noise of the dorms. Josh's parents were warm and welcoming, but it was his older brother Mike who drew my curiosity the most. Tall, broad-shouldered, and with a quiet presence, he seemed like the kind of man who was always measuring his words before speaking. Mike rarely joined our conversations, often disappearing into his room after work, yet even in those brief encounters, passing him in thicket and exchanging polite greetings, you noticed something different in his gaze. It wasn't unfriendly, but it lingered just long enough for me to remember it. Josh often joked about his brother's reserved nature. Mike barely talks to people he doesn't know, he'd say with Asherag. Don't take it personally, he's just like that. I laughed along, but I couldn't help feeling there was more beneath that silence, something unspoken over time. In their house, treating it almost like my second home. I'd spread me notes across their dining table, except cups of tea from Josh's mother. And sometimes, if the night ran late, sleep in the small guest room down there. Mike and I exchanged the occasional nod, a half smile and the morning of our paths crossed, but nothing more. Still, I found myself noticing the smallest details. The way his voice dropped when he spoke, how his words always seemed freshly pressed, and how he never seemed hurried even when leaving for work. One evening Josh had to step out unexpectedly to deliver some notes to a classmate. I stayed behind, absorbed in my laptop. The house was unusually quiet. A few minutes later I heard footsteps and looked up to see Mike standing at the doorway. "You're still here?" he asked, his tone even but carrying an undertone he couldn't quite place. "Yeah, Josh should back soon," I replied, expecting him to leave. Instead, he stepped inside and sat across from me at the table. It was the first time we'd been alone for more than a passing moment. The conversation started innocently. Work, studies, the unpredictable weather. But soon there was a shift. He began asking more personal questions. What I wanted to do after graduation, whether I ever thought about leaving the city, if I liked leaving away from my family. His eyes stayed on mine as I answered, making it difficult to look away. I told myself it was just curiosity that I was reading too much into it. But when he smiled slowly, like he was letting the expression escape against his better judgment, I felt an unexpected heat in my chest. Later that night, Josh returned and the moment dissolved into the easy rhythm of our usual banter. Mike retreated to his room without another word, but I couldn't shake the image of him sitting there, elbows resting on the table, gaze fixed on me, though trying to understand something I hadn't said. A week later I found myself back at their house for an Thursday session. The evening passed, and by the time I realized how late it was, Josh was already yawning. I said goodnight and started down the hallway towards the guest room. Mike happened from the opposite direction, housed in front of me, close enough for him to notice the faint scent of his cologne. His expression was unreadable, but his voice was quiet when he spoke. "We should talk," he said. I hesitated. "About what?" He glanced toward Josh's closed door, then back at me when we were alone. Before I could respond, he stepped past me, disappearing into his room. I stood there for a long moment, my pulse quickening, for reasons I didn't want to aim. That night, lying awake in the guest bed, I replayed the brief exchange in my mind. It was nothing, just a few words, but they carried through it of a promise or a warning. It wasn't sure which. All I knew was that something had shifted, and I couldn't pretend not to notice anymore. The next weekend Josh invited me over again for what was supposed to be a quiet afternoon of exam prep. We sat at the evening table, our notebooks scattered, half-empty mugs of tea between us. Around mid-afternoon, Josh's phone best. His football teammates were Soreto player for a friendly match at Thabuk. He hesitated before looking at me. "You'll be okay here for an hour or so, right?" he asked. I waved him off. "Go, I'll keep working." Minutes later, their front door closed behind him and the house settled into a silence broken on Libby, the faint hum of the ceiling fan. I was buried in my notes when I heard footsteps approaching. I assumed Josh had forgotten something, but it was Mike, who appeared in the doorway. He lingered for a moment, then walked inside, his eyes scanning the open notebooks before settling on me. "Joshkin?" he asked. "Yeah, he'll be back," I replied, unsure why my voice sounded less steady than I intended. Mike nodded, then did something next. He closed the door, gently bent him. The soft click of the locker code louder in my head than it should have. My heartbeat quickened. He crossed the room slowly, stopping just a few feet away. "We didn't get to talk last time," he said, his tone measured almost. I sat back in my chair, pretending to be casual about what his gaze didn't waver. "About how I've noticed you for months now." The word shone between us, weighty and deliberate. My mind raced, a jumble of disbelief and an undeniable pull toward the honesty in his voice. "You're engaged," I said, their mind slipping out before I could stop it. He exhaled, not defensively, but with the heaviness of someone echoing a truth for too long. "I am, but that doesn't erase what I feel." I wanted to say something sharp, something that will draw a clear moral line between us. Instead, I found myself caught in the intensity of his gaze. There was no arrogance in it, no playful flirtation, only sincerity in something that felt dangerously close to longing. I looked away, trying to steady my thoughts. "This isn't right, Mike. Josh is my friend Igno," he said softly, "and that's why I'm telling you instead of pretending I didn't feel it. I've been hiding for years parts of myself, parts one can't show anyone. But with you, it is different." His voice was low, almost confessional. I could feel the air between us tightening like the pause before a storm. I should have stood up, walked out, created distance. Instead, he stayed rooted to the chair. When his brushed mine, it was a feather-light contact, but it sent a current through him that I couldn't ignore. Every rational thought in my head screamed for him to move, yet I didn't. The room felt smaller, the locked door, a silent-minded at the outside world was momentarily shut out. "I'm not asking for anything," Mike continued. "I just needed you to know." But the truth was, he was asking maybe not in words, but in the way. His eyes searched mine in the hesitation of his breath. And without meaning to, I was answering. I swallowed heard, the sound too loud in the stillness. "If we do this, there's no back. I'm already past that point," he said. The days after that locked door moment felt different. Even though nothing tangible had changed, a deal remained the same. Laughing easily, texting me memes, making plans for our next study session. But for me, every word, every shared moment with him was shadowed by the memory of Mike's eyes, his voice, the weight of what was left unsaid. I told myself it was better this way, that since we hadn't crossed any physical line, I could pretend nothing had happened. Yet, my mind betrayed me, replaying every detail from that afternoon. The soft click of the lock, the way his voice lowered when he said me name, the subtle warmth of his hand brushing mine. Whenever I visited McKee, acted as though we'd never shared that conversation. He was polite, distant, unremarkable, and yet in small moments I caught him watching me at the corner of the kitchen across the living room. In the reflection of a darkened window, the glances were fleeting, but enough to send my thoughts spiraling. Avoiding the house seemed like the safest option, but Josh noticed. "You've been busy lately," he said one evening over the phone. "Feels like I barely see you anymore." His tone was light, but there was a trace of hurt beneath it. Guilt pressed down on MH harder than ever. I miss my friend, but being in that house meant existing in the same space as Mike, and I did not trust myself not to read too much into a look or a word. Still, I agreed to come over the next weekend. That night wasn't eventful until Josh stepped out to take a call, leaving me in the living room. I didn't hear Mike approach. I only noticed him when his shadow stretched across the floor. "You're quiet these days," he said softly. "I've been keeping busy," I replied, not meeting his gaze. He stood there for a moment, then stepped closer. "You're thinking about it, too, aren't you?" froze Mike. "I'm not here to push," I interrupted, his voice calm but steady. "But I don't regret what I said. Not for a second." His words landed heavily. A part of me wanted to tell him to stop, to remind him and myself that we were both standing on dangerous ground. But the part I didn't want to admit existed, wanted to ask what might have happened if Josh hadn't come home early that date. Before I couldn't swear, Josh's laughter echoed from the hallway and Mike stepped back. The distance between us restored in a net. Later, as I prepared to leave, Mike lingered by the doorway. Josh was upstairs, rummaging for a book he wanted to lend me. Mike didn't speak, but his eyes held mine in a way that made Thea feel heavier. There was no accusation, no plea, just an unspeaking acknowledged attempt of something neither of us could undo. Walking home that night, I thought about the fragility of trust. Josh had welcomed me into his home, into his family's life, and in return, I had allowed myself to stand on the edge of that could shatter it all. Was what I felt for Mike real? Or was it just temptation disguised as connection? A moment made intoxicating by the secrecy that surrounded it. I didn't even answer. All I knew was that some moments once lived can't be returned. I decided I wouldn't go back to Josh's house for a while. Not because I feared what Mike might do, but because I feared what I might allow myself to feel. The last image I carried was of Mike standing silently in that doorway, his expression unreadable, his presence impossible to forget, and as meek as I wanted to close that chapter. I knew the story wasn't truly over. Some doors once locked change everything long after they'd been opened again. 2 months passed before I saw Mike again. I'd avoided Josh's invitations with excuse about exams, part-time work, and familiar visits. In truth, I needed the distance. Every time I thought of stepping back into the house, I felt the same uneasy pull, as if some part of me was trouble with eyes wide open. Then on Friday evening, Josh called, his voice unusually insistent. "Come over, we're having dinner as a family. Momet, biryani, and she never forgive you if you don't show." I laughed, but Mr. Mac tightened. Right, I'll come be for a little while." When I arrived, the familiar warmth of their home wrapped around me. Clinking cutlery from the kitchen, the aroma of spices in Thea, Josh's cheerful chatter. Mike was at the table, sleeves rolled up, passing dishes without meeting my eyes. It was as if we were strangers again. Truth meal. I tried to act normal, laughing at Josh's jokes, nodding lightly at Mike's occasional remarks, but beneath the surface, every nerve was sore of him. Even when I wasn't looking, I could sense his presence. Quiet, steady, impossible to ignore. After dinner, Josh left to drop his mother at a nearby relative's house, promising to return in 20 minutes. The moment the front door closed, the silence returned thick and deliberate. Mike was rinsing plates in the kitchen. I told myself I should stay in the living room, check my phone, anything to avoid the conversation we hadn't had, but instead I walked in. He didn't look up right away. "You've been gone a long time," he said finally, his voice calm, but carrying something heavier by now. "I thought it was best," I admitted, "for everyone." He shut off the tap and turned to face me. "Best doesn't always mean right." I felt my breath catch. "Mike, I can't. Josh is my friend. You're engaged. We can't keep circling." His expression didn't change, but there was a flicker of something in high regret maybe, or longing. "Do ya think I don't know what this means? I've spent years pretending to be someone I'm not. Then you walked into my life and I can't look away. That's not infatuation. That's truth." I shook my head more to steady myself than in disagreement. Truth doesn't erase consequences. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The air felt charged, the kind of quiet that carries its own weight. "I'm not asking you to do anything reckless," he said at last, "but I need you to understand that some connections don't happen twice in a life. You can bury it if you want. I won't stop you, but don't pretend you didn't feel it." His words landed like stones, heavy and unmovable. I wanted to deny them, but my silence betrayed me. Before I could form a response, headlights swept briefly across the kitchen wall, the sound of a car pulling into the driveway. Josh was back. Mike stepped aside, picking up a towel to dry the last plate, his expression once again neutral. When Josh walked in, the moment dissolved like sugar in hot tea, leaving no visible trace. We chatted casually until it was time for me to leave. At the door, Josh clapped me on the shoulder. "Don't disappear again, we've missed you." I smiled and promised he'd visit soon. Over his shoulder I caught Mike watching me from the hallway. His face was unreadable, but in his eyes, there was something unspoken, an invitation, a warning, and a truth I didn't want to confront all at once. I stepped out into the night, the cool air rushing against my skin. As I walked away, I realized that what unsettled me most wasn't the risk of what might happen if I let myself fall into whatever this was. It was the certainty that part of me already. Thanks for watching.